Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I am an alcoholic. My name is Doug. And I'll start with my customary self-introduction, and if I can find the right page here. I've been sober. We're in November. I'm close to it. And sober 13,812 days, one goddamn day at a time. And the lovely lady who is the love of my life and maybe the purpose for my existence has been sober 2,091 days. You'll note that I don't employ the common blasphemy when I state her number of days, and that's probably because I'm grateful for her sobriety. And, if you do the math, you can know that ours has not been a smooth trip. Starting on this schedule reminds me of the story about the butcher that backed into the meat grinder. He got a little behind in his work. And we seem to be slightly off schedule, so I'll try to condense it to something like an hour. And if you get hungry, you can leave now. There are 4 things I want to talk about today, and if I get 3 out of 4, I'll be doing pretty well. And if I don't, you'll be looking at each other saying, where did the committee get that bozo? The first is alcoholism, and the second is recovery. And then I want to talk a little bit about vocations, which is our calling in life, and then relationships. And if I get 50% of that into this talk, it'll be a pretty good talk. I said I am an alcoholic, and some of you may not know exactly what that means. I believe that alcoholism is addiction to intoxication. And intoxication, in its turn, is a counterfeit of spirituality. That's why I say that I have a disease which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And when I say that alcoholism is an addiction to intoxication, I say that because I've discovered that about 75% of modern day AA, including 100% of everybody under 50, are at least cross-addicted. And some of you can't even identify as alcoholics because you may believe that your primary problem is some other substance. Well, let me say this about that. If you prescribed cocaine for your alcoholism, I think you're a piss-poor pharmacist. But I think that makes you an alcoholic. So I invite you to sit down and shut up and not cut yourself off from a chance at a recovery which you cannot at this time imagine. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And the magic of that is you don't even have to stop if you have the desire. If I ever find a fellowship with lower standards, I will declare myself in. But so far, this is the best place for people of my kind to end up. Now, having said that, I define alcoholism as an addiction to intoxication, and intoxication as a counterfeit of spirituality. Pretty much dealt with alcoholism. And now I want to talk a little bit about recovery. Bill Wilson, one of our co-founders, and the guy who plagiarized the big book. We say he's the author, but there's nothing original in that book. And Bill Wilson was stuck on 12s for a very good reason. 12 is, in medieval numerology, the number of completion. There are 12 tribes of Israel and 12 apostles, and then there are 12 months on the calendar and 12 signs of the zodiac. And so, of course, we had to have 12 steps and 12 traditions, even 12 promises. There's actually, you got to break one of them in half to get 12, but we do. And then there are 12 concepts for world service. If you can't sleep, go get the General Service Manual and read the 12 concepts. It's guaranteed to put your dumb ass to sleep, and you'll become one of 12 people who even know they exist. So Bill's deal was 12s, and mine is 4. 4 was always my magic number. When people would ask me how many of you had, I said 4. And 4 was the right answer because I knew I couldn't get away with 2. I was always way too drunk to pass for having had 2. And I never honestly knew how many I had, so I said 4. And 4 was also my number of control. I was only going to have 4 drinks. I just compressed the time period. I would have 4 in a day or 4 at a sitting. Never more than 4 in an hour or 4 in 15 minutes. But I always had 4. I held on to that number. And I've come to believe that the 12 steps, with credit to Bill W., embody 4 principles. And the 4 principles, as I understand them, are somewhat as follows. The first 3 steps, and I'm more interested in the behavioral implications of those steps than I am in the philosophical discussion of those steps, although I'm grateful for the philosophical discussion of the steps, because without that, this would be a real small meeting. We'd all quit drinking, shake hands, and go home, and that'd be that. But the behavioral implications, 1, 2, and 3. Don't drink. Trust God and be loving. Step 3 says we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. And what the hell is that supposed to mean? If God is love, therefore be loving. That'll save you about 1,000 hours of prayer and meditation. 1, 2, and 3, don't drink. Trust God, be loving. Those include abstinence, which for me is the first principle. Absolute abstinence from alcohol at all times and under all circumstances. 4, 5, 6, and 7. 4 is take inventory. 5 is confess your shortcomings. 6, become willing to change. And 7, ask God for help. Those 4 steps involve recovery, which to me is the second principle. You see, an alcoholic who is drinking is a lot like a man standing on a bridge looking at a gently flowing river beneath. And the only thing wrong with this otherwise peaceful and pastoral scene is that his pants are on fire. And if he's a typical alcoholic, he's asking himself, I wonder how my pants got on fire. If he's ever been to treatment, he puts it in these terms, is it hereditary or environmental? Is it a learned behavior, or did my grandfather have pants on fire? Well, who cares? At some point, jump into the water. Now, the alcoholic who stops drinking is a lot like the guy who just jumped into the water only to remember that he can't swim. His pants are no longer on fire, but he's now in danger of drowning. And Alcoholics Anonymous is not the water you jump into when your pants are on fire. Alcoholics Anonymous is a bunch of idiots in a lifeboat with charred britches. And we come along And we give swimming lessons to people whose pants are no longer on fire. Now, statistically, about half of us get back up on the bridge and start playing with matches. But that's the nature of the disease. It's not the fault of the solution. And I'm one of those who is fortunate enough to have been on board since you bastards pulled me into the boat. But not everybody can say that. But, recovery is the part of the program where we address the underlying issues that invariably lead to relapse. The third principle that I extract from these steps 8 and 9, identify your victims in step 8, make amends where possible in step 9. Those steps represent the principle of restoration. Not just restitution, but restoration. Goods get restored to the people from whom we stole them. Relationships get restored to their proper perspective. We get restored to a full humanity. And so the principle in 8 and 9 is restoration. And then 10, 11, and 12, continue to take inventory, seek God's will, and serve. Practice the principles, carry the message, help others. Continued inventory, seeking God's will, and serving are the principles that for me involve the principle of perseverance, to keep doing those things that we've been doing in order to maintain our sobriety. And so as I understand this thing, the 12 steps involve 4 principles, and those are abstinence, recovery, restoration, and perseverance. It also happens that for inventory purposes, they give us 4 cardinal defects, and these happen to correspond to 4 corresponding virtues. The defects are resentment, fear, selfishness, and dishonesty. Resentment is the name I use for the feeling I have when I am remembering that I did not get my way at some time in the past. Fear is the name I use for the feeling I have when I don't think I'm going to get my way at some time in the future. Selfishness is what I feel when I want my way right now, thank you very much. And dishonesty is fear of truth, that I don't think I'm going to get what I think I want if the truth is told, so I lie. The corresponding virtues are the 4, pardon the use of the word, absolutes of the Oxford groups, and these were honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. Honesty is telling the truth all the time, to yourself first and then to all others. Purity is simply mental discipline, positive thinking. Unselfishness is never wanting anything only for yourself, and love is wanting only good for self and others. And so I see a direct correspondence between those 4 defects of character, resentment, fear, selfishness, and dishonesty, and the corresponding virtues of honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. So having said that, I've dealt with 2 of the 4 things that I wanted to talk about this morning. Alcoholism, which is an addiction to intoxication, which is a counterfeit of spirituality, and recovery, which involves working the steps and practicing those principles. That leaves 2 things to talk about, and that leaves me a lot of time. Vocation, which is your calling in life, and something that's of interest to a lot of us, especially those at the Post Oak Club, relationships. And I'm here to tell you that I'm an example of a person who doesn't have a clue what's going on in the world around him. With respect to vocation, when I was 16 years old, I thought I wanted to be an Episcopal priest. And my father said, "You don't want to do that. For years, I blamed him for my decision, not to follow that calling. Here's the truth. He was the adult. He knew me better than I knew myself. I didn't want to do that. I wanted money, power, prestige, respect. Had no real inclination to be of service to anybody. And so, on my own advice, I declined that vocation, and I went on to follow another at which I was largely successful. In December of 1988, I walked out of a major downtown law firm with a check in my pocket for $40,000, which was my fee for a probate settlement I had just negotiated. And I remember feeling that I wished my father had lived to see me under those circumstances. In December of 1988, I was still married to my first wife. We had a partnership for the general practice of law in Stafford, Texas. We had 2 kids and 2 cars, 2 Volvos, by the way, and a little townhouse in 77057, which is George Herbert Walker Bush's zip code. And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying that to tell you that I got what I wanted. I had the money, the property, the prestige, the townhouse, the wife, the kids, the Volvos, and the $40,000 check, and the respect that I thought I deserved. I also need to tell you, in fairness, I could not have accomplished any of that had it not been for the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm living the American dream, or at least my dream, and I have to give all the credit to AA, because if I had not quit drinking, I wouldn't have had any of that. But here's the catch. Within 4 years, it all came undone. By 1992, that partnership for the general practice of law in Stafford, Texas, which focused a lot on divorce and bankruptcy, had sent my formerly beloved and now blessedly ex-wife and myself careening towards our own divorce and bankruptcy. And I had decided, that felt like failure. That felt like failure. My professional objectives were slowly slipping away. That marriage to which I had felt myself committed was coming apart. And by this time, 18 years sober, and I'm a circuit speaker in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I pretty well know that I cannot drink, but I haven't ruled out suicide. And I had this non-refundable round-trip ticket to go to a conference in Tampa. And I decided, since the ticket was non-refundable, that my not showing would create at least a tremendous inconvenience for the conference committee. So I decided to delay killing myself until after the conference, purely out of respect for the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because you see, I am suicidal, but they want what I have. And those of you who just laughed understand that that's exactly how it works. So I get to the conference in Tampa, and Joe and Charlie are doing their big book study, which I've been to maybe 15 times in my 16 years of sobriety. But purely out of respect for Joe and Charlie, I elect to go to that big book study. And they went through the inventory process again, and as a result of that, I got back to doing the 10th step. And what I'm here to tell you today is that exactly 30 days after I resumed the practice of the 10th step, none of the circumstances, but all of the feelings had changed. Enough that I no longer wanted to drink or to kill myself. So I'm here to tell you that it is possible to become suicidal in Alcoholics Anonymous. But the solution, as always, is to go back to basics. Step 10 is part of my arsenal against my alcoholism, which is a mental, spiritual, and emotional condition which will plague me whether I drink or not, if I let it. Got up to that point. You know where the vocational thing ended up. I filed a bankruptcy, and I've been doing a number of other things since. In fact, I gave up my law license. Here's a bit of personal information. My state bar number is 056-25800. You can go to the state bar website, and you will see that I am administratively disqualified from the practice of law, which means I owe the bastards a lot of money, and I haven't taken my continuing legal education in years, and I no longer give a shit. Because here's the truth about the matter. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and pursued my dream, because of sobriety and with your help, I was granted success in achieving that which I thought I wanted. And when that turned out to leave a bitter taste in my mouth, I had to look back on my career and come to this conclusion. When I made that decision, when I was thinking about maybe becoming an Episcopal priest, one of my mentors had told me that the mysteries of the faith were the Trinity, the Incarnation, and what makes the air conditioning run in the chapel. And what he was trying to tell me was that there were administrative aspects of the ministry that I hadn't even thought about yet. Well, here's the real deal. Because I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and quit drinking, I get called to podia like this one, where when I get up and tell my story about the hopelessness of my alcoholism and the solution I discovered in these rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I am doing the functional equivalent of preaching. And when I sponsor some poor bastard, I get to do an awful lot of what I would call pastoral counseling. And when I hear a fifth step, I become a confessor. And when I sit at that table at the A-Leaf group on Thursday nights now at the BELLAIRE Club, the A-Leaf group is defunct, I am teaching. And I came to the realization that God got exactly what he wanted out of that skill set I was born with, in spite of my resistance to his plan for my life. And here's the kicker. As treasurer of the A-Leaf group, I got to be responsible for keeping the air conditioning on at the A-Leaf group. So the thing came full circle. I got even the administrative ass end of the career that I had declined, because God got what he wanted out of the skill set he gave me, and that's because I pursued simple sobriety in the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now I got to take you back to that little chapel of St. John the Divine, whose air conditioning remains a mystery. Harriet Rogers died. Harriet was the wife of one of my sponsors and had been my first wife's Al-Anon sponsor. And when Harriet died, I was asked to say a few words at her memorial service, which was held in the chapel of St. John the Divine. And so one day I found myself at the lectern in the place where it all began. And I realized that God got what he wanted out of my skill set, and I also realized that he had put me back at the place of beginning just to make sure that I got the message. July, now I'm going to talk about relationships. I'm going to tell a love story. At this point, the women's little ears pick up and the men go take a leak. But I think it's important to tell, and I just love to tell it, so I will. We'll go back to the chapel of St. John the Divine, July 12, 1968. A lady by the name of Linda Heathcock married a guy by the name of Rodney Bowman, and I was an altar boy at their wedding. I was standing 2 steps above her, right next to the priest, holding her bouquet and trying to look down her blouse. In 1981, I'm leading a meeting at the A-Leaf group. At this point, we were meeting in room 51 of the A-Leaf Professional Building. And this vision of loveliness just sort of floated into the room. I would have sworn she was walking a 1/4 inch above the carpet. And she sat down and crossed her legs, and I got caught looking. And she didn't straighten her skirt, and she didn't turn away. She gave me a coy smile and a little wink. And for my part, I would tell you that I fell in love with her right on the spot. We had one of those sign-in books where you put your name and your sobriety date, you know, and it came back around. And I was in it, and I told Ralph Smith, one of my sponsors, I said, "Goddamn, Ralph, that's the sexiest woman I've ever seen in my life." I said, "Even her handwriting is sexy. Look at the loops on those L's." You know. We were not available to each other. She was a single mother, newly sober, trying to raise 2 daughters substantially without help, and the last thing she needed was interference from some screwball in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was still married to my first wife and to the ideal of Christian marriage. And so Linda and I were, I'm going to say, acquainted. We weren't even properly friends, but we remained acquainted for 13 years. And we would run into each other under unexpected circumstances. I was in a mental hospital one time where I wasn't supposed to be because I had a client in there who had a DWI, and I wanted to see him, so I walked through one of those do not open this door under penalty of death doors, and I acted like I knew where I was going, and the nurses left me alone. I wasn't supposed to be in. She was in a locked ward following a suicide attempt, and she wasn't supposed to be out. And we came down intersecting hallways and met at the nurses' station. Just stuff like that, you know, every once in a while kept happening. Then in April of 1994, Linda came back to the A-Leaf group, and by now we're meeting at the place on Boone Road. And again, I'm sharing a meeting. Now, those magnificent legs that first captured my imagination are shrouded in a loose-fitting pair of baggy blue jeans. And that magnificently sculpted torso that supported those perfectly balanced and perfectly shapen breasts, that's all wrapped up in a barn coat she bought with Marlboro miles. And those mouth-watering chocolate locks are slammed under a baseball cap, and her eyes that even Liz Taylor would envy, those are behind an old pair of glasses with one cracked lens. But of course I knew her immediately, and by now she's being sponsored by a girl she used to sponsor. And I asked the A-Leaf group, I said, "Hey, you know, this is Linda and Marcy. Do any of y'all remember them?" And nobody did. And I said, "Well, that's because you bastards were still drinking the last time they were here." We began, at that point, she had about 90 days sobriety, and we started dating in this fashion. Ralph would let me go pick her up either at the Delta Club or at the Halfway House. And I'd bring her out to a Luby's cafeteria where we had dinner with Ralph. And then we'd go to a meeting, usually at A-Leaf, but always with Ralph. And then if there was no woman available to take her back to the Halfway House, he'd let me drive her home. But she had a 10:30 curfew, and Ralph would call me by 10:35 just to make sure everything was kosher. January 1995, we had the most unforgettable birthday night we've ever had at the A-Leaf Group. And birthday nights at A-Leaf were always a big deal. It was like Christmas every month. You know, we had speechifying, and we had a covered dish supper, and people got bouquets and all kinds of good stuff. 95 was unique. Linda was celebrating 1 year, and I was celebrating 19. And her daughters were there, and my mother was there, and it was an unforgettable birthday night. Now, for those of you young ladies who are fairly new in Alcoholics Anonymous, in AA, 1 is the age of consent. We give you 1 year to get your head screwed on straight, and after that we trust you to say no. So the last Saturday of January 1995, we had birthday night at A-Leaf. February 5th of 1995, Linda and I had our first date without Ralph. March 5th of 1995, we went to an AA conference in Gulf Shores, Alabama, and little Miss Marlboro Barncoat could still get into her daughter's bathing suit. And she could damn well still get out of it, too, and I had to see a chiropractor when we got back. March 12th of 1995, Linda moved into that little townhouse in 77057, and we've been inseparable ever since. Last February, we finally got properly married. We thought we ought to be wed before our grandchildren figured out we weren't. Now, for those of you who remember those numbers I gave you earlier, about 13,000 some odd and 2,091, you can tell, those of you who did the math can tell that it hasn't been a smooth trip. But here's part of the magic, I think, of an ideal I once thought I had forfeited. You see, when I got that divorce I told you about, I lost more than a wife and 2 daughters. I lost an ideal. I had an ideal of Christian marriage as being 1 man and 1 woman together forever. And when my ex-wife left, I processed that as a moral failure on my part. 2 things happened to change that notion. One is a priest told me that if I had died at age 35, my marriage would have been a success. Well, that'll put a divorce in a new light, won't it? And then the other was that finally, eventually, Linda came into my life and we began to build the kind of relationship that I had always held in high esteem and held out as being my ideal of 1 man and 1 woman together forever. And I've come to believe this. I've come to believe that I traded a good woman for a better one, and that there was never anything wrong with that ideal, but that I had been trying the right thing with the wrong woman. And when Linda and I got together, a funny thing happened. And this is another aspect or manifestation of grace. She is, I don't say was, I say is, my ideal woman. Every woman 1 pound heavier is fat, and every woman 1 pound lighter is thin. Every woman 1 day older is old, and every woman 1 day younger is a baby. Every woman 1 cup size bigger is grotesque, and every woman 1 cup size smaller has no chest. And when she broke her back, I decided wheelchairs are sexy. When you look up the word woman in the dictionary, they ought to just have her picture, because that's all there is to it. And that to me is a manifestation of grace, because it's something I could not do on my own. I could decide to love her, but I could not actually love her without the grace of God. If God is not the significant other in your primary relationship, you don't have one. And that's the up and the down, the long and the short, the in and the out of relationships. in Alcoholics Anonymous. Have to say this too about Al-Anon. Anyone attracted to an alcoholic is probably an untreated codependent. Anyone bound to an alcoholic by ties of blood or affection is definitely an Al-Anon, and you have a primary illness. When Linda drinks, Chuck Norris comes up out of that wheelchair, and I go to Al-Anon. And I'm here to tell you that the Fellowship of Al-Anon has saved my marriage, if not my life. And if there's anybody here who feels that you can't identify with Alcoholics Anonymous, well, maybe if your significant other wet the bed last night and you slept in it, you ought to go to Al-Anon. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but said there were 4 things I was going to try to discuss, and I've hit them. Alcoholism, recovery, vocation, relationships. I'm just going to say 4 more things, and then I'll shut up. First of all, for alcoholism, just to reiterate, alcoholism, in my opinion now, is an addiction to intoxication, which itself is a counterfeit of spirituality. If you have a desire to stop drinking, come on in, sit down, shut up, and disregard what you think may be your drug of choice. You may call yourself an addict, but I'll bet you drank when you couldn't score. If you couldn't find the dope man, you went to the 7-Eleven. You know, if you have my disease, that's just comes with the territory. For recovery, if you practice absolute abstinence from alcohol, get into recovery from the underlying condition which feeds your insanity, restore proper relationships with God, self, and fellows, and persevere in what you're doing, I'll guarantee your sobriety, because I have almost 38 years of experience that allow me to say that. Bottom line on the deal, then you get into vocations. I told you about that part. I was pursuing what I thought I wanted. Sobriety and Alcoholics Anonymous allowed me to get it. Meanwhile, through the back door, God was getting the benefit of the skill set He gave me in the first place, but He had to use the mechanism of Alcoholics Anonymous to sit my scrawny white ass in the right chair and squeeze that out of me. And in terms of relationships, where I thought I had failed and I married a woman I thought was the only woman who could love me. And as a result of my coming and staying in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, God has given me a woman I love. And so what's been going on all this time that I've been trying to do what I think I should is that a power greater than myself has been working behind my back to do what I cannot. The reason we have to help one another is that we simply can't help ourselves. But the ultimate reality of recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous is simply this. There's an old song that says, God only knows, God makes His plans. And the blueprint is unavailable. The information is unavailable to the common man. But I'm here to say that while I was pursuing what I thought I wanted, and while I was in open rebellion against my higher power, running away from my vocation, married to the wrong woman, allowed to achieve exactly what I thought I should in spite of what I was supposed to be doing, while all that's going on, somewhere in the background, in the deep recesses of the universal unconscious, God was laughing.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control is connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.